I don't know, like maybe it felt constrained by the fact that it was a Christmas special to kind of it hit certain notes. I don't know, maybe that was it. But
and that's often the problem, isn't it? The Christmas specials are generally not good.
I mean, they're variable, aren't they? The one, I mean, and the other thing I think about the Christmas specials is when they're bad, they're really bad.
Like they're really bad, aren't they?
When really stink, yeah.
When they're bad, they suck.
But I will say, and this probably leads us into our main topic of conversation tonight. The first ever Christmas special, which is also David Tennant's first full episode, I can't help but notice owes a certain debt to the Yattering and Jack.
Yeah, actually, now I've only just twigged. The sequence. Yes,
which is also a Christmas story, by the way. So Merry Christmas.
Yes, I never twigged, but there is an exact replica.
Yeah,
there is an exact. I did not twig until I know that. No, I'm not even. No, twig. Ha, funny. Sorry, no, I did not.
Oh, I see. We're branching out into puns now.
That was unintentional. Oh, Rowan will love this. They love puns. Oh.
I don't know.
That was unintentional, Rowan. Stop it. But you're absolutely right. There is the Christmas tree that spins around and is in this story.
It is here.
And actually, those who are listening can probably hear in my voice. This is a Clive Barker story. This is from the Books of Blood, right?
Yeah, that's right. This is one.
A series of stories that tends to have a certain patina in the horror community, right? People remember these books as Barker's bloodiest, darkest, most nihilistic stories, right? That's right. And then you get the Yattering and Jack.
And here we are. What are we, like 3 stories in?
Right. I mean, I was actually just thinking about this because I've got the book in front of me, and you've got the Yattering and Jack sandwiched in between the Midnight Meat Train and Pig's Blood Blues.
Blues, yes. And here we are, and it's this incredible. So actually, let's go back a second. So I just want to say, like, before we start, so background on me, and some regular listeners may have already heard this, but people maybe just following this series might not know this about me. But Deal with the Devil stories is one of my favorite.
Oh yeah, you like the Faust stuff, don't you?
Fucking love it. Always love it. I love it. I love it because it's formulaic, and yet within the formula, it manages perpetually to surprise when done well. And
infinite variety, right?
Yeah, but I think I was thinking about this the other day, and actually, it was a conversation I was having with. I was telling you earlier. I spoke to Johnny Mains. He was talking about his novel that we were talking about. It's a novel where it's told. The story is told out of sequence, so it ends at the beginning. If you see what I mean, it's a novel in 3 novellas, and the final novella of the 3 is the earliest in the chronology. So you kind of, and he described it as being like a magic trick. And I think for me, that's what I love about Deal with the Devil stories, because like a magic trick, you know the rules, and the rules are always the same, and yet, when it's done well, you are always surprised somehow.
Yeah, it's one of the fundamental narratives in horror, isn't it? The Deal with the Devil story. It's one of the baseline narratives.
Yeah.
It's used all the time, like in so many ways and shapes and forms. Hellraiser. I mean, Barker loves it. Barker goes back to it again and again and again and again. Hellraiser is that. It's exactly that story.
Well, and I would say, although it's not completely explicit, I also think it's at least an undercurrent of Thief of Always.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
At length. There are absolute elements of that, because as soon as you get to the house in that and you start seeing that, you're like,
exactly, yeah.
And I mean, how much is all this costing?
Yeah. What makes the Yattering and Jack really interesting? Barker loves Faust. That is one of Barker's like baseline narratives in horror. He absolutely loves it. What's interesting about the Yattering and Jack is that it is a lampoon on it.
Yeah.
So it's the inversion of it. In fact, it's the total inversion of the Faustian myth. Here, who has all of the power? It is not the metaphysical forces. It's not the forces of hell. It is not the demon. It's the human being. It's the human being. The human being knows so much of the rules of the story. I mean, again, it's like many of the stories in the Books of Blood. It's meta, isn't it? It's a commentary upon the form. The human being here, Jack Polo, the most boring man in existence, apparently. So he seems to be, anyway, knows the rules of the story as though he is a reader.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, and Barker uses almost exactly that language, and explicitly in the story at the halfway point, at the reveal. But I think, okay, I mean yes to all of that. Also, the other way that this is a subversion of a Deal with the Devil story is that unusually, Jack is not the person who's made the deal.
Right, it's his mother, right?
Right, Jack's mother made a deal with the devil, and then Jack's mother cheated. So Jack's mother was in one of the traditional Deal with the Devil stories.
Yep, that's right. That's gone before.
Yeah, this is all prologue, and prologue that we don't learn about until about halfway through the story, to be clear as well. That's what's so fun about it.
And even when we learn about it, it's totally throwaway. It's like a line that tells you. I think it's actually the Yattering itself, isn't it?
Correct.
It's having like an internal monologue, isn't it?
No, he's talking to Beelzebub.
Oh, he's talking to Beelzebub. That's right. Yes.
He's actually, because he's like, the thing is, Yattering by this point in the narrative, I mean, it's quite early on in the story, but he's already mightily fucked off with his complete inability to have any impact on Jack.
Honestly, I love the way the Yattering responds in this story. In any traditional story of this type, where there is a demonic infestation in a house, where it's causing like poltergeist activity and whatnot, the entity is in control always. Here, it's this frustrated, annoyed creature because it just cannot get any traction on this guy.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful, and it's great because it sets up. It is that in that sense, it is like a traditional Deal with the Devil story in that it's a puzzle box. But the difference is, with most Deal with the Devil stories, the puzzle box is, as the reader, it's how is the person making the bargain going to get out of this, or are they not? Right, that's and you don't know. What's great is going into the story, you never know how it's going to end, which way it's going to cut. It's going to end on a twist, but the twist could be that they lose and go to hell. That's as often the twist as the reverse, probably more often, but still there's that tension. But you still know that, again, it's like a magic trick. You're going to see something, you just don't know what. And that's why I love them, because I'm perpetually drawn in by that. And I think, but what's clever about this one, is that the puzzle box is subtly different. Actually, the demon is the one trying to figure out.
Yes,
because at the start of the story, the demon doesn't know why they're there.
No,
Yattering's like, I don't know why I got this gig. I don't know who this fucking guy is. I don't know why I can't crack him. No one will tell me what I'm supposed to be doing. I know I'm low down the demonic pecking order, but do me a fucking favor. Why does anyone give a shit about this pickle salesman, right?
This is the other thing, right? It's the implied bureaucracy of hell.
Oh, I love that.
It's brilliant, isn't it? The version of hell that you get here is it is the Christianic hell. It's the hell of Christianity. So it's the hell of Dante, right?
Yeah.
But it's a hell that's run on rules and laws and regulations and stipulations. Everything has to be above board. And in that regard, this is Barker being, again, as he is a lot in these stories, it's Barker being a bit arch, He is making a commentary upon what traditional horror media portrays as horrific, right? These entities that derive from traditional mythology, like Pazuzu in The Exorcist, like poltergeists in possession stories or whatever, they run on very traditional rules. And what he's saying to the reader here is, these rules. You know these rules, like Jack Polo does. Why are you afraid of them? Why is it scary? It isn't. What's scary is humanity, right?
Yeah. There is that. I also think, though, it speaks very much to Barker's sensibilities about his notion of, because we talked about this before, and we talked especially about Weeworld, what's Barker's true notion of evil? And it's not even beyond the corrupt copper, who obviously illegitimate authority, which obviously the biggest evil is the salesman, right? That's the biggest evil in Weeworld. Well, here it's like, what's the biggest, how is the entire of the hell structure, what is it? It's fucking bureaucracy. bureaucracy.
Yes,
That's what's evil. That's the source of misery. And
what he's basically saying here is that metaphysics means nothing if it runs on rules. If it runs on regulations and traditions and assumptions, it is meaningless. I mean, Jack Polo, and what I love about Jack Polo is he could have done a classic reveal at the end where Jack Polo is revealed as being like as much an occultist as his mother was, where he is actually like a sorcerer or a wizard or whatever, and he's actually snared the Yattering to do something epic and change the world. Actually, no, he is as boring and as dusty in his soul as the Yattering perceives him to be.
Yeah, he just wants his quiet life. He really does. He just wants his cat to stop exploding.
Exactly. I mean, that's way worse than anything in its own peculiar way. There is an expression of Barker's own assumptions of horror here. Barker finds the banality of humanity to be horrific. The fact that this guy has access to the secret metaphysics of creation, all of reality, and he manages to get one over on it. What he does with it is he does that British thing. He goes inside and has a cup of tea and gets it to clear up.
It's to tidy up the mess.
It's absolutely amazing. I love it. I can't believe. I mean, I've read this story quite a bit, and people don't comment on this one as much, and I find that amazing because it's so starkly different from everything else Barker writes. It's so funny.
I mean, that's the thing, and I don't. I was always going to like this story because I like Deal with the Devil stories, and it's Barker doing a Deal with the Devil story, albeit with the twists that we've articulated. But nonetheless, that is always going to get my attention, and he does not disappoint. Right, on an epic scale, he delivers everything you'd want from that premise. The subversions being very much part of that. I think.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely. That's just delightful, isn't it? But you're right. The comedy is really strong. The other thing I was really struck by was it reminded me very much of Pratchett's take on Faust, Eric.
Of course,
because again, that is one that focuses on the bureaucracy as hell. I'll never forget the kind of punchline gag, because the demons don't like this new manager who comes in in Eric, because he's really like officious and he's trying to, and it's like, he does this whole thing about like, well, you're whipping them. But they can't actually feel pain because they're dead.
They have no nerve endings.
You're not actually but it's what we do. Well, and then there's this whole thing. I think there's a point where he's got Sisyphus and he's not rolling the rock up the hill because he's got to read the health and safety rule book on rolling rocks uphill before he can start. And it's like 17 volumes long.
Even the damned souls in the Discworld's hell prefer the Dantean hell of the epic suffering to the bureaucracy of an office environment. The
thing I love about that, and I mean, I guess I'm going to spoil Eric now for anyone who hasn't read it, so skip ahead a couple of minutes. But
this book from the 1980s.
There's probably someone coming to it new, and you should read it because it's delightful. But I want to talk
really good.
But I need to talk about the punchline of Eric because it relates to this story. So as I say, skip ahead a couple of minutes. But the punchline to Eric, and I've never forgotten. I mean, I don't remember much of the book, but I remember this so vividly. The demons effectively decide they need to sort this guy out, but the way they do it is they fool him into thinking he's been promoted. General manager, and then they give him his own office, and then they just fucking leave him there and get back to
stays there forever.
And I love it.
Stays there forever, twiddling his thumbs.
No. There's this great scene where he's sat there at his desk and he straightens up his thing. And he's looking at the in tray and the out tray, and he's just feeling fulfilled as a demonic entity. Like he's got a notepad and it's memo pad, and he grabs a pencil and he looks at it thoughtfully and he writes down, what business are we in? Then he pauses and he thinks, and he writes in capital letters, we are in the damnation business. And it's just, he's the happiest demon in the world, and and it really it came back to me so strongly in the scene where Yattering and Beelzebub are having this very one, because there's this whole thing about Yattering really shouldn't be doing this in the first place, but it's autumn, which is Hell's preferred season. So they're all in a good mood. So they decide to just, all right, we'll talk to Yattering.
We'll allow this. We'll allow this for now.
But it's also, think about how, like, you talked about the bureaucracy, and I think what you said was right. But I also think that for Barker, I think bureaucracy is hell in a very real sense.
So too. Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
but what's fascinating as well is that part of the seeds of the Yattering's undoing are the fact that the bureaucracy of hell refuses to give him the information he needs to do his fucking job. It's not really the Yattering's fault that this fucking thing goes wrong. Because why can't they just fucking tell him?
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. Yes. This is why. This is what's happening. Yeah, absolutely. But they can't, of course, because of the bureaucracy. It's amazing. You know, these are the laws that everything has to operate by.
But
and I love that.
I mean, that might be it. Or it might not even be that they're rules. It might just be that they're such petty bureaucrats that their instinct is to just hoard information and not share it. I think you could read it that way, you know, and it works.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, the commentary that he's providing upon like traditional notions of hell and demonic possession and whatnot, it's really excoriating, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really excoriating. He's basically saying that it's nothing to be afraid of. It is no better or worse than what you face at the office every day.
Yeah.
And his portraiture of Jack Polo is amazing, isn't it? Because you get it through the Yattering's eyes, and the Yattering is a totally elemental creature. It's a demon. It's a demon in the Christianic tradition, so all it wants is chaos and mischief and malevolence and to inflict pain and suffering, and that's its job. That's its purpose. And it's been assigned this guy, this Jack Polo, and it does everything in its, and it's also made very clear that this thing is a feeble demon. It's pathetic. It's an imp, isn't it?
It's very low down on Hell's totem pole. This thing. That's part of the charm of it, right? That's part of what's so funny about it.
It's an English tale in that regard, isn't it? Because it's an underdog, right? It's an underdog, and you share its frustration because we've all had jobs like this. We've all had jobs where you just can't get traction on it. You can't get things to work, where nothing goes right,
and you can't get a fucking straight answer out of the boss about what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, that's the bit I found like painfully relatable, right? It was just like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing? Because we say so.
Because we say so. Because that's your job, right? That's what you do. Oh man, I just love it, and the way, like the expressions of fury, that this impotent little demon has. They're the best, right? And I love the way Jack Polo, whatever this demon does, and it goes full out. It does go full out, like it goes full on supernatural phenomena. It makes like poltergeist activity happen. He just shrugs and it's que sera, sera.
It murders not one, but three of his cats.
Three of his cats in increasingly elaborate ways.
I do just want to point this out as well. There's a rule that's very well observed in comedy, in horror rather, which is like you like don't kill the pets. Like you can murder the adults, you can murder the children. Don't kill the pets. It's a big. I remember like I had this conversation with Matt Shaw, who writes really hardcore extreme horror, like really, really, really proper extreme horror. Novels, you know, novellas, and he's very, very good at it. He's making a lot of money, and I consider him a friend for whatever that means. But you know what I mean? Like but that's what he does. Yeah. And he said the one time he got complaints was when I think it was a cat or a dog, and it was just, or it might even have been like a chicken. He got killed, and that was it. He was like, "Don't ever kill the animals, mate. You can't do it." And I'm like, wow.
That is amazing. I mean, considering what Matt writes,
you think about like I don't know. I mean, I don't want to go into it. If that's your thing, you can hunt it out for yourself. But like, it's just crazy But I believe him. I absolutely believe him that was the one time he got complaints.
Oh yeah, totally. You can't get away with it. You can't get away with killing the pets or particularly the dogs. You know, if you kill the dogs, you're done. You are gonna get complaints.
Unless you're Clive Barker, in which case you can murder 3 cats in increasingly elaborate ways, and it's fucking hilarious.
Well, is it the last one where it just has a temper tantrum and it makes it explode? It just looks at it, doesn't it, and makes it explode.
Bits of cat all over the ceiling of the woods. As the guy Jack just walks in and just goes, "Damn dogs,
damn dogs,
damn dogs."
He's an amazing character, actually, Jack. I mean, there's a wonderful purity to Jack, as I say. It's a double bluff that Barker's pulling. It is a double bluff because as I say, you think he's going to like snare the demon and then get one over on Hell, and he's going to use that power somehow, like in some awful or epic way. No.
But the narrative structure is fascinating because the entire first half of the narrative is entirely from the Yattering's perspective.
Yep.
And you get the backstory of he's been there for months and he can't get any traction no matter what shit he pulls. He has the conversation with Beelzebub. He can't get any information out of the bosses as to what he's supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
He loses the plot so badly he explodes cat number 3. And it's only when you get to the halfway point that the narrative just flips. And again, Barker breaks the rules because you head hop. You've been through, it's all been the Yattering's perspective, and then suddenly you're inside Jack's head. You're inside head.
You're inside Jack's head, and suddenly you realize this guy who's been presented in a very particular vein to you is actually a little bit cleverer and a little bit more complex than you think. He's been playing a lifelong game, right?
Yeah, but what
lifelong game
he has. But what's brilliant about it is that so Barker flips the script, and suddenly we're inside Polo's head, and we know that he's known about the Yattering the whole time. He knows it's there, and he's got some understanding at least of the rules. We don't know how, but it's the way that Barker very cleverly parcels out the information to the reader. That is what is so brilliant about it. So it's like it's peeling an onion. You get a layer of information, then you get another layer that changes or deepens your understanding of what's going on, but it's not the core. You've got to keep going for that. And as you say, it is actually a wonderful double bluff, because at the end it turns out that all Polo has ever wanted is the quiet life he's been projecting the entire time. That's all he's ever wanted, but circumstance have conspired to put him in this position, or he's got to wrestle with a bureaucratic demon together. Now here's the thing though, you could look at that as actually that's a very stark metaphor for just modern life, right? The idea that in order to just have a peaceful existence, you have to wrestle with the demonic hell force that is bureaucracy. That's actually true. That's actually
absolutely
real life in Britain.
I know that Barker probably wouldn't have much regard for Jack Polo because he is a manifestation of everything Barker hates. He is actually a salesman. I think he sells turnips or something, doesn't he? Something ridiculous like that.
No, he imports pickles.
Imports pickles, that's right. He's a pickle man. He imports pickles.
He's a pickle man.
That's his job. He imports gherkins. I mean, it's the most brilliant thing, right?
It's so but the thing about that is it's inane, but it is harmless.
It's harmless, right?
He doesn't sell, he doesn't work for big tobacco or big oil, you know what I mean? Like he's not an arms dealer. He's just,
he's nobody. He is it is
people
the most
like pickles,
right? It is the most blameless, banal thing.
Yeah, it's so inane.
Found really.
Wonderful.
I do get, knowing Barker's work and knowing his regard for like just basic normalcy, I have no doubt that he probably has quite a bit of contempt for characters like Jack Polo, but. Take that aside, he is kind of blameless, isn't he? If he wants just this quiet, banal life, then fine.
I think it's kind of it's an interesting thing you say that, because I found it kind of, maybe this just speaks to our different positionality to the text, but I thought it was quite a sympathetic portrait. I particularly enjoyed the stuff with his daughters. I thought they were very well drawn, and I loved the moment where Jack describes his daughters and the way he describes, the I can't remember the eldest and the youngest, but one of them as being very much like his wife and the other one very much being like Jack's own mother.
Yeah.
But he does it, it's not remotely in a creepy way, but just the way he pulls out a combination of physical characteristics and behaviors and traits. And again, talk about efficiency in storytelling. He does it in like 3 or 4 sentences, and you've got a pretty good pen portrait of these two women, distinct characters you've literally just met. It's actually exquisite writing.
It really is.
And it's the kind of thing that's done so smoothly it goes under the radar of most readers. You won't even notice how
you
well
get the family dynamic. You get like the power dynamic of them as well. Like there's that incredibly pragmatic one.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, is no nonsense. It's utterly brilliant.
A sense that they're a loving unit. That's the thing that I think is really, and again, it's interesting because I'm sure you're right about, about Barker's kind of wider perceptions and feelings about this, but nonetheless, it's actually a really loving, intimate portrait of this tiny family unit, and it's beautiful, I think.
It really is. It really is. Barker's very complex in that regard, and in a lot of his stories, he is really excoriating about banality and normalcy as it's assumed within culture and within like family units and life and whatnot. But he is self-aware enough to understand the complexity of that, and you get often within the same stories, often within the same scenes, you get examinations of the innate beauty of something that is normal, just a normal life lived, or just the joy that can come from something completely everyday.
See, I agree with that, but I think what it is that I think Barker's anger at the status quo comes from about the power of the status quo and the damage it does to people who don't conform to it.
Yes.
But I think what's interesting about this story is it feels to me that like he's not, it's almost like he seems to be saying, this is probably, again, this is almost certainly me projecting my own shit onto it, but it's almost like he seems to be saying like, it's not about necessarily an individual or an individual group of people who are quote unquote normal. Like that might be fine. It's about the tyranny of normalcy.
Yes, that's right. It's about the enshrinement of normalcy.
And about the crushing weight of it, and about when it becomes a very narrowly prescribed lens, and anything outside of that should be treated with suspicion or disdain or violence, right? That's the problem. About which I agree with him completely, obviously.
I mean, interestingly, now that I think about it, you actually get a kind of corollary to this story in the very last story in all of the Books of Blood, not the Book of Blood itself, the final one, but The Last Illusion.
Okay.
Where you get we'll talk about it when we come to it.
I've actually read it because it's a Harry DeMore story, and I had to read it for my revisit. So it's actually the only other story I've read at this point.
Interestingly, you get a similar thing happening in that story, where you get someone who gets one over on the powers of hell and then tries to make them into something banal, and hell is very angry about that.
Well, it's another kind of it's yet another sort of deal with the devil, isn't it? In its own way,
very much so.
But
very much so. A different take on it, but yes, it very much so is. But you can't imagine like Jack becoming like the sorcerer character in that, can you? Actually becoming an entity of power of any kind. It just isn't. I don't think it's in him.
No. But the thing that I do find interesting about this story, though, thinking about it, is that there is a way in which both of the protagonist characters, Yattering and Jack, I think they're both kind of sympathetic characters in a way.
Yeah.
Because I did find, I mean, the thing about Yattering is trapped at least twice over. Once by their nature, by whatever it is that creates a demonic entity that enshrines certain behaviors and values into them that are apparently, well, almost inviolate, right, as we discover. But and also trapped by the bureaucracy of hell, forcing them into a situation they're not equipped to deal with, that they can't. And it's weird because that directly mirrors the Jack situation. Polo didn't choose any of this.
Right, you're absolutely correct. So the Yattering is a negativity elemental. It's a demon.
Yeah.
It is created to be negative. That's its entire. It's not just its raison d'etre. It's not just its job. It's its identity. It can't escape it.
Right, but there's also, for me, it's almost like it's operating. It's almost like an allegorical version of. There's this quote from. I first came across it in the movie Gangs of New York. I don't know if it's original to that movie, but there's a point in that movie where it looks like there might be a draft riot, and the rich folks are in their house and they're talking about, do you think there's going to be a draft riot? Do you think there isn't? And one of them says it doesn't really matter because, I think he's quoting. I think he's quoting P.T. Barnum, but I don't know if it's an actual Barnum quote or not. But it basically says, "What's that thing you always say? You can always hire one half of the poor to kill the other half."
Yeah.
And I love Gangs of New York, and that line is a big part of the reason why, because that encapsulates a lot of what that film's really about.
Yeah.
And for me, the what's going on in Yattering and the Jack is like actually both the Yattering and Jack are equally trapped.
Yeah.
And they are trapped by power structures around them that are not of their making, that are not of their choosing, and that have forced them into a situation. You know, in Jack's case, he's being punished for the quote unquote sins of the mother. I love how Barker just completely skates over whatever the fuck that was. I love that all that we know is she got away with it because she died in the arms of a priest. I fucking love that. What does that even mean? Is that actually a get out of hell free card? Is that how it works? You can live an entirely sinful life, but as long as if, you know, with your last breath, you fling yourself into the arms of a priest, that's how you get to heaven. Who knows? I don't know, but it's wonderful. What a wonderful idea. Or even better, in the arms of a priest. I mean, that could mean
I being Barker, I think I know how.
You know what I mean? Like, so in other words, honest, your real get out of hell reach is to seduce a priest just before you die. Right?
And again, it's a commentary upon the it's not just the bureaucracy of hell, it's also the bureaucracy of heaven, right?
Of heaven. Well, which comes back in the punchline, right?
Absolutely. Salvation is cheap, right? In this universe, salvation is completely cheap. It's meaningless. It's as meaningless as damnation.
But there's also that lovely twist right at the end where you just, you know, Jack's completely won. He's you know, Yattering's now tied to him forever, but Yattering turns to him with a sly smile and says, like, okay, you got me, but guess what? You're never getting into heaven now.
And Jack, the punchline is great, isn't it? Yeah. It's great because he considers for a moment, doesn't he? He takes a moment.
Right. He's like, oh yeah.
And he says to the Yattering,
well, we actually get his
say.
Yeah. But we do get Jack's internal monologue where he's like, yeah, he's right. I'm probably not. Yeah, okay.
But so what?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's well, that's what's great.
Soul like Jack do with paradise anyway?
Again, it's what I love about that is that in microcosm is the double bluff of the whole story, just given one last go around at the very, and that's happening in the last two paragraphs. So in the last two paragraphs, Barker introduces a coda that makes you think there's going to be one more twist.
Yeah.
And there isn't. And the reason there isn't is the same reason it wasn't in the first place, because Polo both is and is not exactly what he says he is.
Exactly that. And it's wonderful. It's really fascinating because it gives so much agency and power to this guy who is not interested in either heaven or hell.
No, but
he's rejected the whole metaphysics and said, no, I'm going to take control of this to make it mine.
But but two things about that. One, that's the source of his power.
Yeah.
The source of his power is his desire for a banal life.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And he's prepared to fight a literal demon from hell. He's prepared to do a battle of wits with a demon from hell just to get that. But also, he has to fight an actual demon from hell just to fucking get that. Just that most basic thing,
and has to risk his eternal soul as well, as it tells him. You know, he has to risk damnation, right?
And the health of his daughters, and everything. And he's fucking lost his wife, by the way.
Yeah,
I mean, and there's, you know, that's a really interesting part of the story too, because Barker leaves that ambiguous. Like, was his wife having an affair partly because of the influence of the Yattering, or was she having an affair because Jack was so committed to this part of playing the banal that he couldn't be the husband she needed him to be? The text doesn't tell us.
No, it leaves it up to you, doesn't it?
And it's something that, and I think that's intentional for us to churn over afterwards. Like, wait a minute, why? But then it's horrible because his wife has an affair. He doesn't even react to that. No. She leaves him, not because she even doesn't love him anymore, but because she's upset that he's not upset.
Yeah, because there's no investment from him. There's no passion to the guy.
Right, and then she fucking kills herself.
Yeah.
It's desperately sad. It really is. Like, it's really horrible, the pathos of that. And the whole time, Polo's in there saying to himself, we learn at the halfway mark, can't give it away, can't do anything.
Can't give the game away, can't react, can't respond, can't acknowledge that this thing exists.
Like,
can't give them traction, right? Can't give them a way in.
He's fucking crazier than the demon, man. Yeah. That is bonkers shit right there. Absolutely. I mean, the psychology of this man. And again, that's where Barker's, again, it's so excoriating. It's like, this is the level of fucking mental gymnastics and insanity you have to put yourself through just to be quote unquote normal. This is what it actually requires of you. This is what it will strip of your humanity.
It literally requires you to conquer heaven and hell. That's what you need to do. Amazing. Man. I mean, on a completely other note, the set pieces of physical comedy in this story are amazing, aren't they? Not something Barker is generally noted for.
I mean, we found our way in on the Christmas tree, which, as I say, Russell T Davies did a wonderful kind of riff on for the Christmas invasion, which was Tennant's first story. But the fucking bird.
That's the most. Up until that point, the Yattering is playing a really clever game. It is being as subtle as it can be, isn't it? Everything can be sort of explained, which Jack himself and the daughters do. Oh, subsidence. When something, I just love that. I love that to bits. Que sera, sera, damn dogs, etc. Everything has a rational explanation. The dancing turkey in the oven.
That's fucking
not so much. And I love the fact that he really sells it. Barker sells it on both levels because it is an horrific thing.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. It's strange the way he describes it, sort of like slopping cooking juices all over the place.
Yeah.
The daughters, you see it through the eyes of the daughters a lot of the time, and they are absolutely petrified as to what's happening. Whereas Jack is trying to keep abreast of the situation. He's trying to hold a lid on it all. But
that's the other reason it's a great moment, because that's the moment where Jack's confidence slips for the first time. That's the moment where Jack's like, oh shit, this thing's smarter than I thought. Oh shit, I might be in trouble. Like, it's a great moment because it needs it. The story needs the tension at that moment.
Otherwise you don't get the risk. You don't get the sense that there's a danger here. And also there's a confusion as well, because why is he running back and forth when he says, "Oh, I think I'll go for a walk"? Why?
Yeah,
what does that mean? Because Barker still hasn't set up the rule yet. That the demon can't trespass beyond a particular perimeter. And that's what he's been doing. He's winding the damn thing up. He is he's tightening the knot of tension until it can't even think clearly, until it's completely apoplectic with rage.
Yeah.
Just so it'll follow him across the threshold. And once he's done that, it belongs to him. Those are the rules.
It's so great. It's so great. And it's what I love about it is what's clever is how Barker manages the information flow throughout the story.
Yeah,
he does it so skillfully because the story is so compelling that, again, it's not the kind of thing that you notice almost on a conscious level unless you're really reading it to track it.
Yeah.
But as I say, like, I don't think it's any coincidence. It's almost exactly the halfway part of the story that you get the flip and you realize, oh no, Jack knows what's going on. And that's a revelationary moment right there. That's a huge revelation.
Yeah, and it sets the story on a completely different track at that point. You think it's this game, isn't it, where he's inverting all your expectations. You think you know where you're going with this story, and then it flips, and then it flips again, and then it flips again. Often within the space of a few lines. It's a brilliant sleight of hand that he plays. Well, and again, to think that he was who he was and where he was at the time of writing this, a young guy, early 30s, down and out, middle of London in Thatcherite Britain, amazing stuff.
I mean, to put to build on what you just said there, that you're absolutely right about the flips. What's interesting to me is that the flips themselves start to occur in a recursive loop or in a spiraling loop. The first big flip is the halfway mark, but the moment with the bird is almost exactly the 3/4 mark. And that's another flip where it's like, oh, maybe I'm not in charge. Maybe I'm not in control. Maybe I'm not going to win this.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get quicker and quicker and quicker until, as you said, and as we talked about earlier, in the final 2 paragraphs, there's that wonderful final, double flip that's also, the themes of the entire story played out in two paragraphs with the, like, you're not going to get into heaven. Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
And it's great. It's so good. But it's like, it again, think about that in terms of story structure. Your first big revelation happens at the halfway mark. There's a second one at 3/4, and then you get like 4 or 5 in increasingly, narrow period of time. As stakes get higher, because the other moment that's really, really powerful right near the end is when he's his daughters are freaking out, and
Yes.
that's the moment of maximum danger and weakness for Jack, because you can feel his internal conflict at that moment, and it's like, can he? And it's the thing, like he's almost telling himself, you've got to push through this.
Yeah,
he says like she'll be fine, and he
yes,
says
because
to
one
himself,
of his daughters becomes
That's
catatonic. Doesn't
yeah, she goes. I mean, yeah, she certainly goes. She's experiencing some kind of psychotic break, which is understandable if you just had a Christmas tree try and murder you,
Yes.
and had a turkey like one after the other. I think that's a perfectly
it's a reasonable response.
It's a perfectly reasonable response. But he says to the other daughter, the one who hasn't flipped, she'll get over it, and then he says to himself, too harsh, almost unforgivable.
Yeah.
But you have to keep going.
Yeah.
And again, it's another moment of pressure. It's another moment of flip. And then there's that great moment where he's trying he throws the bolt and it gets thrown back, and he throws it and it gets thrown back. And there's a moment where he's almost like, Jack's mind starts to come up strain. Like, am I just going to have to stand here and do this for the rest of my life? Like, seriously, like, is this it now? Just me standing in front of this door and like not getting this bolt. It's great. It's so good.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's like the kinetic energy of those last chapters as well, because it is quite a sedate story up until that point. People don't do very much within this story beyond the Yattering itself, right? They're all contained within this house. There's not much space in which to operate. But suddenly, in the last few pages, it becomes a Scooby-Doo episode. It becomes a slapstick comedy, right? Everyone is running around and screaming and falling over and running through backwards and forwards through doors. It's utterly brilliant.
No, absolutely. And it made me think of something else. It's just like, and I understand why people don't talk about this in terms of Barker's work, because there's so much else to talk about and it's almost all brilliant. But like, he writes action so fucking well,
doesn't
and
he?
And it's something that is hard to write well. And again, this is something that you'll know as well as I. Somebody's read an awful lot of indie horror, like. It trips people up. It's hard to do. It's hard to write. It's hard to write an action sequence in a novel such that the reader both feels that they know what's going on and are keeping track of everything, but it doesn't feel mechanical. It feels like an experience. It feels like you're in the middle of it. And Barker just does it effortlessly. It reminded me of the sequence in Imagica where I can't remember the name of the character now, but someone deploys this magic and it ends up tearing a gigantic hole, rips through the street and just creates carnage. And
that's Gentle destroying the Nuliana.
Yeah, that's right. Which is an incredible moment, because Gentle doesn't know their own power, right? And it's just it's an unfortunate, but it's horrific, right? And again, it's like he describes it so well, and it creates he paints such a vivid picture in a small number of words, but also like creates that sense of energy. And you're right, the kinetic energy in this story, once really from the bird on,
it's quite breathless, isn't it?
It really is
breathless.
It's like the last, it's like the final 50 pages of a King novel. It's fucking relentless. It's ferocious, and again, the power dynamic is constantly shifting. And we're with Jack at this point. We're inside Jack's perspective, and Jack's just like, "What the fuck?" Like, how the fuck do I get this?
Do I work this now?
How do I stay looking normal? How do I keep? It's so good.
It's amazing. I love it.
Again, at that point, you still don't know what Jack's end goal is.
You really don't. You are still in the dark. You still have no idea what this guy wants. And what I love is you and the Yattering are akin in that. The reader and the Yattering are kind of the same. I love it when it does manifest, when it finally crosses the threshold and he can see it for the first time. And it asks him, "What do you want? What can I give you? This is the way it works. What do you want?" And it asks him things like, it does the classic Mephistophelian thing. Do you want to fly? Do you want Helen of Troy?
Helen of Troy, right. No, I remember that because it was when you were saying earlier about banality, and it's great because there is that line where Jack's like, "That just sounds exhausting."
Yeah, that just sounds exhausting. He's so British. He's so English, isn't it?
English. I love that. That's what Basil Fawlty would say. Like that bit in Fawlty Towers where they've got the Americans there and they're complaining about the weather, and Basil's like, it rains. The Americans like, it rains all the time, and it's like, it's miserable. He says, "I don't think it's miserable. I find it bracing."
Yeah, it's I mean, this creature obviously is a thing. It's an abstract creature. It's a thing of miracles. Okay, they're dark miracles generally, but it's upset about the fact that even now he's won, it can't provide him with anything because he doesn't want anything.
Go and tidy up the mess you made.
Go and tidy up the mess.
It's got to be like the worst. That's got to be the worst thing for a demon ever, hasn't it?
For an enslaved demon to not even be able to grant miracles or anything, or power or anything. No, go and clean up.
Clean up? No, worse than that. Clean up after yourself.
After yourself.
Like,
wow.
You, man.
He is literally rubbing like the dog's nose in its own mess, isn't he? It's
you thought Beelzebub was bad, you know what I mean? Like this guy.
Wow.
So good.
Wow. What a creation. What a character. I don't think I've ever come across anything like him in fiction like this.
I don't think I've come across anything like either of them. And that's what I love about, because I love the Yattering. I love him. He's a vicious little psychopath, but I love him.
Yeah, he's fun, isn't he?
Well, I keep coming back to it. He's as trapped as Jack is.
Yeah.
He's just a working. What I love about the Yattering is, unlike Jack, what's different is the Yattering's got ambition.
Yeah.
He's got potentially knows if he could just get a break, man. He could be a really fucking good demon, man. He could really fuck some people up. Why has he been given the shittier side? It's not fair. You know, like he's got that striving little guy, you know, it's like that middle-aged guy stuck in a job. Has he missed his shot at greatness, but I could fucking do it. I could do that manager post. You know, it's like that energy to him. It's
absolutely I mean, I think our mutual friend Jack Graham would have a lot to say about this story, because you've got two characters who, from a Marxist reading, are operating on the same class. They're in the same level, and they are both prey to the same external pressures that they're born into, the systems that are keeping them down. The difference between them is that the Yattering wants to be bourgeoisie, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Whereas Polo doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's the Yattering that fails, right? It's the Yattering that ultimately ends up becoming underclass. He becomes a slave at the end. That's
true. Yeah, that's true. And it's interesting. I mean, that reading's really fascinating, because the idea that the Yattering wants to become bourgeoisie, which is the ultimate evil. I mean, that's quite quite kind of telling. Really. That's really bad. I love
and the thing is, Barker at this point would have been aware of that, because he studied philosophy at university. He would have been keenly aware of that.
Yeah. No, he knows what he's doing. I mean, just again, I suspect I'm going to be saying this every single episode. I think I have every episode.
I think you've probably. Oh, just wait. The
sheer amount of depth that is packed into this,
right?
And I mean this as a very sincere compliment. This is a very light story.
Totally, yeah. It's not long. It's one of the shortest stories in the entire collection.
It zips along because Barker's a fucking master at just sentence level getting you to the next sentence. It's beautifully written.
It's funny as hell. It's packed with jokes and humor and slapstick.
Not a single ounce of fat anywhere. It's lean as fuck. It's just
it's a masterclass, isn't it?
And there's all this shit going on under the hood, you know?
Yeah. You can sit here and analyze. I mean, we're only going to do like an hour, but you could go on. There are multiple. And
I even think that the choice of comedy is deliberate. I even think that speaks to Barker's sensibilities of understanding that, whether, I mean, instinctively or intellectually, it doesn't matter, but he understands on some level that to tell this kind of story, to tell this particular kind of story about that relationship, about that mutual comedy is the lens you use, you know. I mean, it's fucking Kafkaesque.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it absolutely is a Kafkaesque story. Yeah.
You know, Kafka meets Faust. I mean, what's not to love?
Meets a little bit of Scooby-Doo along the way, right?
Yeah. With just a quintessential English sensibility running through it like a stick of rock. You know, it's just.
And to find it here, like we said earlier at the very beginning, to find it here sandwiched in between The Midnight Meat Train and Pig's Blood Blues, which are two of Barker's heaviest, most violent, most nihilistically realist stories you'll probably find in the collections, to be honest. It's an amazing palate cleanser. Even the positionality of it is brilliant.
I mean, I think all that's true, but I will say this as well, especially if maybe I feel like we're probably getting close to wrapping up on this, but that is true. I will say though, and I haven't read the rest of the collection, but this story is angrier than either of those two under the hood.
Oh yeah.
And for me, that's the other thing that's brilliant about it is that Barker understands that clearly that comedy is an amazing vehicle for anger.
Yeah.
Because this is like fucking brass eye levels of anger.
Yeah,
this
it's
really
social
like
satire, right? It's social and political satire. That's what Barker's doing here.
Yeah.
He's using, unlike later on when he goes actually very literally for metaphysics, here he's using metaphysics as a subject for exploring other things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is
it's just.
And again, I'm surprised it's not commented upon more, but it does tend to be one of those stories that isn't. People tend to talk about the Midnight Meat Train. They tend to talk about In the Hills, the Cities. Wait for that one, by the way. But not this one, and it surprises me. The thing is, in a collection like the Books of Blood, and you are right, you're going to be saying this about every story. That's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem. Insofar, what a wonderful problem to have. Right? A complete surfeit of riches.
But I mean, certainly, I mean, I have read Pig's Blood Blues. I haven't read beyond that. I've read The Last Illusion. So those are the only two other stories in this collection that I've read other than this and the ones we've covered.
Oh, honestly, just wait. I mean, the Hills, the Cities. Wait,
sure,
that
one. I know. But I will say that in that small field, this is. It's probably my favourite so far.
This is the one.
Honesty,
wow.
This is the bar at the moment.
Yeah. Given your proclivities.
This is it exactly, and that's I want to be clear about that. That is not a statement of absolute quality as regards to this story or the rest of the collection. I'm sure other people have other favourites, but for me personally, with what I like with my sensibilities, this is just perfection. Really, in a short stories can do perfection in a way that novels almost never can.
It's absolutely true.
It's just golden.
There is just nothing redundant and nothing misplaced and not a misstep in the entire thing. I mean, it is
absolutely everything it sets out to do. It achieves magnificently.
Yeah, putting on your writer hat, it's a masterclass, isn't it? If you want to write a short story, a Faustian short story,
it's a masterclass and a challenge all in one. It's like fucking beat that,
Yeah.
And I know like the whole collection's like that to a degree, and all of the first decade and a half of Barker's work at least is like that.
It's absolutely true. It's intimidating. It's intimidating and inspiring in equal measure. That's the thing with Barker. That's what he's like.
Right, but as you say, for me in particular, and especially as we might be talking about this in a separate show fairly shortly, but this will make more sense. So at the time of recording this, the final essay in My Life in Horror hasn't been released yet. It's called, but it's based on a short story by Robert Bloch called That Hellbound Train, the first short horror story I can remember reading.
Wow,
and it's a Deal with the Devil story.
Yeah.
And I couldn't think of a better essay to close out My Life in Horror with, but that's how long Deal with the Devil stories have had their hooks in me.
Yeah, so from the beginning, really.
Yeah, and to have Barker, unquestionably one of the best to ever do it, take on a story like that and do something this profound and hilarious with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a this project is such a joy, it's such a gift, and I cannot fucking wait to see what else I've got.
This is my sincere pleasure in it, to be honest, Kit. Yeah. It's my sincere pleasure to get your reactions to these stories for the first time. It's brilliant. It's just wonderful.
You know what I love about it for me is it's the opposite of what I've done with My Life in Horror, which has been like getting to grips with something I know really well and kind of trying to excavate it. This is the opposite of that. This is like, okay, hit me. What you got this time? It's so great.
As I say, there are certain stories coming. I just can't wait to hit them. I'm just like, I can't wait to hit them. I mean, I've leapt really far ahead. I've read most of them now, and first of all, having the excuse to revisit them was amazing because I haven't read them for a long time. These ones, so it's just been revelatory all over again. I mean, this guy is he is on another level, isn't he? He's like where did he come from? He's like an alien. He's like something from some other dimension. This guy.
Yeah. No, he's just like I say, he's just one of the best to ever do it.
Yeah.
You can't,
There are some stars were right.
Yeah.
During his creation and the influences that impacted upon him throughout his life, and it's resulted in this phenomena of an imagination that is unlike anything that has ever been.
Yeah. I know, I mean, we've talked about it before, but just to, in this particular story, like, again, he just very, very casually breaks, 2 or 3 really important rules of short narrative. Not least being you're not allowed to change perspectives at all, but certainly not halfway through. That's
and then not to keep doing it, like flip-flopping.
And he does it effortlessly. He doesn't make a show of it. He doesn't make a fuss of it. He just fucking does it, and he does it, and he's so chill about doing it.
Well, I think the reason he's
just fucking go with it. You just as the reader, you're just like, oh, okay.
And I think that's because that's what he does.
Yeah,
he's not that fussed about conforming to any particular rules. In the writing, I imagine he's not very conscious of it at all. He just does it because that's what the story wants.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think. Yeah, I think it's completely in service to the story and the impact. And of course, as I say, I've said it a lot now, but that halfway point revelation, it can only happen if you do the perspective shoot. You have to do it.
You've got to do it because it does. Of course, it breaks the rules of the story if you don't. Completely.
You have to go to Jack's POV, and you have to see, and it's an absolute sledgehammer. When you're like, oh, he fucking knows. Oh my God. And then you replay the entire first half of the story in your head and you're like, this guy is crazy.
Yeah.
What the fuck? And then, of course, immediately after that, you're thinking like, okay, what can your end game possibly be?
Yeah. And at the same time, you're thinking, of course he knows.
Right. Yeah. It's the dual revelation. Like, he can't, how, exactly.
How could he be so blasé in the face of what he's seen without knowing?
Yeah,
and having some apprehension of the situation.
But that's the thing, is through the Yattering's perspective, Barker's done such a good job of selling you on this guy.
Yeah.
Because of his confusion, that it is still a revelation. And you're right. As soon as your 2 reactions are, oh shit, he knows, and then of course he knows. How can he not know?
Yeah.
But it's brilliant. It's so good.
It is amazing. So guys, Yattering and Jack, I mean, I'd love to know actually, what are your thoughts on it? I would really love to get reactions to this one, because it is not your classic Barkerian story, is it?
No, but I wonder if you're right. I wonder if the reason this goes under discussed is either that or because of its placement in the collection. Because I know that Midnight Meat Train carries a lot of weight, and I have read Pig's Blood Blues, and I'm looking forward to talking about that.
Wow,
very different conversation, but it's a fantastic piece of work in its own right. But yeah, I don't know if it is. I don't know if it's because it's outside of his usual thing, because of the comedy, although his other work has said elements of that. I don't know whether it's a tonal thing, but I think this is an absolute fucking masterpiece.
Oh yeah, rereading it this time was amazing. I read it in one, you just rushed through the entire thing and just loved it. Laughed at all the right places.
Just fucking great. Absolutely brilliant.